I had always worked as a nurse in the emergency department, accustomed to seeing injuries and critical cases, adapting to the chaos that filled the place day and night. After all these years, nothing surprised me anymore. But what frightened me the most was not death. It was what I saw in the white room. On a cold night, an elderly man was brought into the hospital in a coma. He had no identification, and no one knew where he came from. His face was so pale that I wondered if he was even alive, yet his vital signs were perfectly normal, oddly stable for someone in his condition. Due to a lack of available beds in the main ward, he was moved to room 217, a rarely used room at the end of the hallway, far from the other patients. I had always felt uneasy about it, but it was the only option. After finishing my examination and noting down my observations, I was about to leave when he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were strange, wider than normal, as if they belonged to someone else. He stared at me for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but his lips never moved. A shiver crawled down my spine, but I tried to ignore it. Perhaps it was just an unconscious neurological response, but I was wrong. 2:45 a.m. I was doing my routine rounds, checking on the patients to ensure their conditions were stable. As I approached the end of the hallway, I heard faint whispers coming from room 217. My blood ran cold because I was certain the old man was alone. Worse still, the whispers were not his voice, but multiple voices speaking together in an unknown language. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to open the door. When I entered, I found the man sitting on his bed, staring at the opposite wall. His body was unnaturally rigid, as if he wasn't human. I cautiously stepped closer and asked, "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't respond. He didn't even move. I reached out and gently touched his shoulder. The moment my fingers brushed against his clothing, something happened that my mind couldn't comprehend. He vanished. There was no one on the bed. The room was completely empty, as if I had imagined everything. But I knew what I saw, what I heard. It wasn't just my imagination. 3 a.m., I ran to the security room, my heart pounding in terror. I asked the security guard to rewind the footage from room 217. We watched the recordings together. The room appeared as it was, but the bed had been empty the entire time. There was no one inside, not the old man, not even me, as if the room had never been opened that night. "This is impossible," I whispered, feeling tears of fear welling up in my eyes. The guard looked at me with concern and asked, "Are you sure you entered that room?" I couldn't answer. 3:10 a.m. I returned to room 217 with hesitant steps, my heart pounding violently. Everything looked normal, but something was out of place. On the bed lay a small piece of paper that hadn't been there before. I slowly reached for it with trembling hands. The writing was uneven, as if written hastily by a shaky hand. "You weren't supposed to see me." A cold chill ran down my spine, as if unseen eyes were watching me. I dropped the paper and ran out of the room without looking back. The next day, I couldn't sleep. When I returned to the hospital, I found room 217 sealed with caution tape. I asked the supervisor why, and he sighed, saying, "Room 217? That room hasn't been used for years. It's been closed for a long time due to ventilation issues." My blood froze in my veins. "But I was there last night. There was a man." The supervisor stopped and gave me a strange look before saying calmly, "Are you sure about that?" I had no answer, because when I checked the records, there was no entry for any patient admitted to the emergency ward last night, and no trace of that man existed anywhere. To this day, whenever I pass the hallway leading to room 217, that eerie chill never leaves me. No one talks about it. No one mentions it. But every time I close my eyes, I see that note and hear those whispers again.